Three images, hold them in your mind at the same time. Roman soldiers, trained men, professional men, men who had stood watch at crucifixions without flinching, lying on the ground outside a sealed tomb in Jerusalem, shaking like leaves, barely conscious. An elderly priest inside the most sacred room in the world, opening his mouth to speak and finding nothing there. And a group of scholars in ancient Babylon, standing next to a man by the Tigris River, feeling something they cannot see pressing through the air around them, and running. Not walking away, running. These are not stories about danger. Nobody was threatening these people. Nobody was raising a sword. Nobody was in any immediate physical peril. The Roman soldiers were not attacked. The elderly priest was not harmed. The scholars were not chased. They ran from something they could not see, could not name, and could not survive standing next to. And in every single one of these stories, the first word spoken, before any message, before any announcement, before any explanation of why heaven had broken into earth at this particular moment in this particular place, were the same. Do not be afraid, you have heard these words so many times. In so many Christmas pageants, in so many carols, on so many greeting cards with a soft-lit figure and gentle wings, and a face that looks like it belongs in a Renaissance painting. You have heard them so many times that they have begun to sound like a greeting, like hello, like the first line of a conversation that is about to be warm and comfortable. That is not what these words were. This is not a story about angels as gentle beings who arrive in a glow of warm light. This is not a story about creatures with the faces of children and the dispositions of counselors. This is not a story about comfort, at least not at first. This is a story about why every single person in the biblical record who encountered an angel reacted the same way before they heard a single word from heaven. They fell, they fled, they shook until they could not stand. And only after that did the angel have to say the four words, not as reassurance, as emergency instructions, stay with me. Because there was a Greek phrase in Luke chapter 2, the Christmas chapter, the shepherds, and the glory chapter, that appears in exactly the same form in one other place in the entire Gospel of Luke. I will tell you where, but the connection between those two moments tells you something about what these words actually were, and why the God of the universe apparently needed to say them so many times. We begin not on a hillside in Bethlehem. We begin in a desert with a woman who has run out of water and is watching her child die. Her name is Hagar. She is Egyptian, which means she is already an outsider in this story. A woman who does not belong to the covenant family she lives with, does not share their language of origin, does not carry their religious inheritance. She is a slave. She belongs to a woman named Sarah, wife of the patriarch Abraham. And on the morning we are meeting her, she has been sent away. Here is the full weight of the situation. Sarah had finally borne the son God promised. Isaac, born in their old age, the fulfillment of a decades-long wait. But Hagar's son Ishmael, older, conceived years before through Sarah's own arrangement, now a teenager, had done something at the celebration feast that made Sarah demand they leave. Abraham, grieved and uncertain, was told by God to listen to his wife. So at first light he gave Hagar bread and a skin of water, and sent her out with her son into the wilderness of Beersheba. The water ran out. In the desert this is not an inconvenience, it is a countdown. When Ishmael could not walk any further, Hagar put him under one of the bushes. Then she walked about a bowshot away, 100 feet, maybe more, and sat down. She could not watch. She put her face in her hands. She wept. And then the angel of God called to her from heaven. Genesis 21, verse 17. Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. The word for heard in that sentence is the same root as Ishmael's own name. Ishmael means God hears. He has been carrying the answer to his mother's prayer in his name his entire life, and neither of them knew it would cash in like this, on the floor of a desert, with the water gone and the end in sight. Get up, lift the boy, take him by the hand. And then God opened her eyes, that is the exact phrase, opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water that had been there all along. Pay attention to what happened in this scene. There was no fire, no blinding light. no figure that shone like lightning. The text gives us no physical description of what appeared to Hagar at all. There was only a voice from heaven, 4 words, and then a well she somehow had not seen. But the "do not be afraid" was still necessary, because Hagar was not terrified of an angel. She was in a state of grief so complete that she had given up, she had stopped, she had turned her face away. And the command was not addressed to a theological question or a supernatural vision. It was addressed to a woman sitting in the dust with her hands over her face, saying in the only way she knew how, "I cannot do this anymore." She is the first person in the Bible to receive those 4 words. And she is a runaway slave woman in a desert, alone with a dying child with no one looking for her. Do not be afraid, God opened her eyes. The second encounter is nothing like the first. 300 years later, approximately, a man is crouched in a winepress threshing wheat. His name is Gideon. The reason he is threshing wheat in a winepress, instead of on an open threshing floor where the wind can separate the grain, is that the Midianites have been raiding Israel's harvest for 7 years running. They descend like locusts, the text says, so many that you cannot count them, and they take the grain and the livestock and leave the land stripped. Gideon is in a hole in the ground, doing the work of survival in secret because the alternative is watching his family go hungry. He is not a warrior, he is not a hero. He is a frightened man trying to hold something together in a situation that has been grinding people down for 7 years. This is the man the angel comes to. Judges chapter 6 verse 12. The Lord is with you, mighty warrior. He is not yet a mighty warrior. He is threshing grain in a winepress. The angel's greeting is not a description of what Gideon is. It is a declaration of who Gideon is about to become, and the gap between those two things is so large that Gideon immediately begins to argue. And this is where it gets remarkable. Gideon says, essentially, if the Lord is with us, why has all of this happened? Where are the miracles our fathers talked about? Why has God handed us over to the Midianites? It is the most honest speech in Judges. It is the question that people think but rarely say, the one about the gap between the theology you were handed and the reality you are living. The angel does not rebuke him for it, the angel listens. And then something happens that ends the argument without answering it. The tip of the angel's staff touches the meat and bread Gideon has prepared. Fire leaps from the rock. The angel is gone, and Gideon suddenly understands what he was talking to. Judges 6 verse 22. When Gideon realized that it was the angel of the Lord, he exclaimed, "Alas, sovereign Lord! I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." He thinks he is going to die. Not because the angel threatened him. The angel had been up to this point almost conversational, but the understanding of what was actually standing in that winepress with him is enough. In the tradition Gideon inherited, to see God face to face was to die. The fear is not superstition. It is the logical conclusion of accurate theology. The voice came back, "Peace, do not be afraid. You are not going to die." Specific, not general reassurance, you are not going to die. The angel addresses the exact fear, the precise terror, because the fear was real, and real fear requires a real answer. Gideon was not being dramatic. He was being correct. And the God who appeared to him in fire acknowledged the correctness of the fear before he told him to set it down. The third story has no fire, no winepress, no argument. The third story has a very old man in the most sacred room in the world, waiting to do a job he has been waiting decades to do. The temple in Jerusalem was the center of Jewish worship in the 1st century. A sprawling complex on a platform the size of 26 football fields, with stone blocks so large that when the historian Josephus described them, he specified he was not exaggerating. The inner chambers were accessible only to priests, and the incense offering, performed twice daily inside the holy place, was distributed by lot. The Mishnah records that once a priest had performed this service, he was disqualified from serving in that role again. The lot might fall to a priest once in a career. It might never fall at all. Zechariah has been a priest his entire working life. He has watched the lots fall to other men. He has conducted the outer ceremonies, the public rituals, the functions of an ordinary temple priest, and he has done it faithfully, the text says. He and his wife Elizabeth were righteous before God, walking blamelessly in all the commandments, and they had no children. In the ancient world, this was more than a private grief. It was a visible gap, a wound that everyone could see, an unanswered question written on the shape of their household. He had prayed for a child, for years, and then for more years. And then, at some point, he had probably stopped expecting the prayer to be answered and started just holding the shape of it. The habit of reaching in the dark toward something that might not be there anymore. The lot fell to Zechariah. He went into the holy place to burn incense. He was alone. Luke chapter 1 verse 11. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. The Greek word Luke uses for Zechariah's reaction is ataract. He was troubled, disturbed, thrown into confusion. Not yet afraid. First confused, the way you are confused when something is standing in a space where nothing should be standing. And then separately, fear fell upon him. Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Not a prayer, your prayer. The specific, personal, years-long petition of a specific elderly priest who had been carrying this particular hope long enough that it had become part of the furniture of his inner life. The angel is not making a theological announcement. The angel is speaking to a man. You can argue, if you want, that Zechariah should have believed. You can note that his response, asking for a sign, doubting the word, is less graceful than Mary's. But sit in the scene first. He is an old man. He has been faithful in the small work for a lifetime. He is standing alone in the most sacred room in the world. And an angel, something that should not exist in the space he is standing in, has just told him that the prayer he has been whispering in the dark since he was a young man has been heard. That is not a moment for theological precision. That is a moment where your knees simply stop holding you up. Before we go any further, subscribe. We have only arrived at the easy encounters. What Daniel sees by the Tigris River makes Gideon's fire look gentle. What John sees on Patmos has no precedent anywhere in the natural world. By the time we reach the end of this video, you will understand why "do not be afraid" was not optional. It was the only possible way the conversation could begin. The year is approximately 536 BC. The place is the western bank of the Tigris River in what is now modern Iraq. A man named Daniel, an elderly Jewish statesman who has survived the Babylonian exile and outlasted an empire, has been fasting and mourning for 3 weeks. He is standing by the river when it happens. What he sees next is the most detailed description of a divine being in the entire Old Testament outside of Ezekiel. Daniel, chapter 10, verses 5 and 6. I looked up, and there before me was a man dressed in linen, with a belt of fine gold around his waist. His body was like chrysolite, his face like lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and his voice was like the sound of a multitude. Read that slowly. Face like lightning, not like a warm glow, but like a strike. Eyes like flaming torches. Voice like a multitude. Not like one voice, however powerful, but like many voices speaking simultaneously from a single source. The image compounds. It does not simplify into something comfortable. And here is what happened to the men standing near Daniel who could not see the vision but could feel it. The men with me did not see it, but such terror overwhelmed them that they fled and hid themselves. They ran, they hid, and they had not even seen it directly. They were feeling the peripheral weight of something they had no visual access to. The displaced air, the pressure of a different order of existence pressing against the boundary of theirs. And they could not stay in the radius of it. Daniel did not run. He fell, face to the ground, his color drained, he was helpless. And then the angel touched him. Do not be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to your words. Your words were heard. The first day. Here's what that means for every person who has ever prayed for something and waited in silence for an answer that did not come. The prayer entered heaven the moment it was prayed. This angel says something in the heavenly realm had opposed him for 3 weeks, that what Daniel experienced as silence was, from the other side of the veil, a battle in transit. The distance between heaven and earth is not the distance between a question and no one listening. It is the distance between the question and the war being fought to bring the answer through. Do not be afraid in this passage is not only emotional reassurance. It is cosmological information. You were not forgotten. You were never forgotten. Now, what do these beings actually look like? Ezekiel chapter 1. The prophet sees 4 living creatures, each with 4 faces, man, lion, ox, eagle, 4 wings, straight legs ending in hooves like burnished bronze, moving in every direction without turning because they face all 4 directions at once. And alongside them are wheels, a wheel intersecting a wheel, and the rims of the wheels are full of eyes. Not a row of eyes. Full Revelation chapter 4. John sees the same creatures again around the throne of God. Each of the 4 living creatures had 6 wings and was covered with eyes all around, even under its wings. Under the wings. This is not a Christmas card. This is not the gentle figure in white with the comforting face. This is something so unlike anything in the created order that the only way to describe it is to stack every powerful image at once. And even that falls short. Pseudo-Dionysius, the 5th century theologian who wrote the first systematic Christian angelology, a text called the Celestial Hierarchy, argued that the frightening appearances of angels in Scripture were themselves a form of mercy. An easy image would be pleasant, he wrote, but it would lie. It would suggest the distance between heaven and earth is a small distance. The frightening image tells the truth. You are standing in the presence of something that exists in a different order than you do. The fear is the honest response, and the do not be afraid is not the denial of the gap. It is the hand reaching across it. But now here is the part that breaks the pattern. Gabriel comes to Mary. Luke says she was greatly troubled, and what troubled her was not the sight of the angel. It was the words he said. She was pondering what kind of greeting this might be. Every other person in this list was undone by the appearance of the angel before a word was spoken. Mary is troubled by the content of the greeting. She is thinking. And then Gabriel says it. Do not be afraid, Mary, you have found favor with God. No fire yet. No prostration, no compelled silence. The do not be afraid arrives before any visible terror because Gabriel, who has delivered this kind of news to human beings before, apparently understands that what he is about to say will be the thing that undoes her. And so the steadying comes first, a hand on the shoulder before the weight arrives. She does not fall, she asks a question, and she gives an answer that has been spoken in churches for 2,000 years. Let it be to me according to your word. Now the open loop closes. I told you at the beginning that there is a Greek phrase in Luke chapter 2 that appears in exactly the same form in one other place in the entire gospel. The phrase is ephobethesan phobon megan. They feared with a great fear, a construction that doubles the verb and the noun together for emphasis. Luke uses it in chapter 2 when the shepherds see the angel, and he uses it again in chapter 8. In chapter 8, a storm is raging on the Sea of Galilee. The disciples are experienced fishermen, men who know water, who have read weather their entire lives. They are afraid during the storm, but their fear during the storm is ordinary fear, human fear, fear in response to a threat. Then Jesus stood up. He said, "Peace, be still." The wind stopped. The water went flat, and the disciples were terrified with a great terror, the same phrase, the same construction. They were more afraid of the miracle than they had been of the storm. The storm was dangerous. People were going to die, and they felt ordinary fear. But the moment the creator of the wind addressed the wind by name and it obeyed, the moment the same holiness that drove Daniel's companions from the riverbank stepped up in a fishing boat, the disciples felt exactly what the shepherds felt. The fear not of danger, but of proximity. The fear of standing next to something that belongs to a different order of existence than you do. Hold that and come to the resurrection morning. Matthew chapter 28. Before dawn. The stone is still in place. Roman soldiers stand at their posts. An angel descends from heaven, his appearance like lightning, his clothes white as snow. The guards shook and became like dead men. They had done nothing wrong, they were doing their job. They had simply come into the proximity of something their bodies could not sustain. And when the women arrived, who had walked through the dark before sunrise because love will do that, carrying their grief and their spices, the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen, just as he said." And finally, the last time in the biblical record, a very old man on a very small island. John has been exiled to Patmos. He is in his 90s. Every other apostle is gone. Peter crucified. Paul beheaded. James martyred. John is the last one left, and he has been standing alone for a long time. He carries the weight of having witnessed things. The Transfiguration, the Last Supper, the cross, the empty tomb, that no one else alive can confirm. And he carries the island, the exile, the particular loneliness of being very old in a place very far from everyone who knew the same things you know. On a Sunday morning, the island shifts. He hears a voice like a trumpet behind him. He turns. 7 golden lampstands, and among them a figure in a robe to his feet, hair white as snow, eyes like blazing fire, feet like glowing bronze, a face like the sun shining in full strength. And John, who had walked with this person for 3 years, who had leaned against him at the Last Supper, who had seen him cooking fish on the shore of Galilee, fell at his feet as though dead, not as though surprised, as though dead, and then the hand. He placed his right hand on me and said, "Do not be afraid, I am the first and the last. I am the living one. I was dead, and now look, I am alive forever and ever. And I hold the keys of death and Hades, the same hand that broke bread, the same hand that touched the eyes of blind men, the same hand that was nailed to wood, on the shoulder of an old man on a rock in the Aegean Sea. Do not be afraid." Here is what I need you to understand, and this matters especially if you are someone who has been carrying something for a long time, not a week or a season. The kind of weight you have stopped explaining to people because you ran out of ways to describe it. The kind that is simply there when you wake at 3 in the morning, as it always is. Every single "do not be afraid" in this list came to a person who was undone, not by danger, but by contrast. The shepherds were not in danger. Zechariah was not in danger. The women at the tomb were not in danger. John was not in danger. What they encountered was purity and power and presence so far outside the created order that the human self could not stay assembled next to it. C.S. Lewis wrote in The Problem of Pain that the experience of the holy always begins in terror before it arrives at love, that we could not bear love of that magnitude if we were not first undone by the weight of it. A candle next to the sun is not harmed. It simply becomes invisible in the presence of something brighter. "Do not be afraid" is not the dismissal of the fear. What the angel is saying is, you can move through it. You do not have to stay on the ground. You do not have to stay with your face in the dust. There is something through the fear, something on the other side of the place where the self stops holding together, and I am here to help you get there. Get up. 3 things to take with you. The first, do not be afraid, is passage, not dismissal. Every person in this list who heard those words was in the grip of something real, genuine awe at genuine holiness, the correct response to what they were standing in front of. The angel was not telling them the fear was wrong. The angel was telling them the fear was not the destination. It was a door, and there was something through it worth standing up for. The second, look at who heard these words. Hagar was a runaway slave, alone in a desert with a dying child at the exact moment she had given up. Gideon was in a hole in the ground, hiding from an enemy that had been winning for 7 years. Zechariah was an old man whose most private hope had been waiting so long that hope had almost become just a habit. The shepherds were anonymous, unnamed, the kind of people you would not choose if you were staging an announcement. Not one of them was selected for their status. Not one of them was reached because they had finally earned it. They were found by a God who was already looking. The third is the one I want to leave with you. John on Patmos was very old. Everyone he had walked with was gone. He was alone on an island, and the island was not going to change. God did not send the voice like a trumpet and the face like the sun in full strength, because John's circumstances had finally improved. He sent it into the exile, into the island, into the specific combination of old age and isolation and the weight of being the last one standing. And the first thing said was the hand on the shoulder and the words. If you are sitting with something tonight that feels like an island, some exile you have been living in long enough that you have stopped expecting it to change, I want you to know that the same God who found Hagar in a desert before she thought to look up is still sending that same word into the specific places where people wait, not after the exile ends into it. Before I let you go, tell me in the comments, which encounter in this video landed hardest for you? Was it Hagar in the desert hearing those words with her son dying under a bush? Zechariah learning that his forgotten prayer had been received from the very first day he prayed it? Or John on Patmos, old and alone, with the hand on his shoulder and the words into his island? Tell me below. I read every single one. If this moved you, subscribe. Every week we go into the parts of Scripture most people walk right past on their way to the familiar verse. You do not want to miss what is next. There are said to be 365 fear-nots in the Bible, one for every day. Whether the precise count holds up matters less than the sheer frequency. The fact that the God of the universe apparently knew his people would need to hear this again and again and again. That the first instinct every single time heaven pressed close to earth was the same one. The shaking, the falling, the face to the ground. And every single time, the same word was waiting on the other side. Do not be afraid.